Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second Humanities and Languages Divisional Seminar for the semester. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Nisha PR, who is a literature student turned historian, social historian, who has held fellowships in most recently at Leiden University in the Netherlands, before that in Johannesburg, and also at Yale.
Yes.
And Nisha has written a wonderful, done a wonderful study on the social history of the Indian Circus. As you can see, most of us have grown up with some kind of interaction with the circus. At least for me, I never stopped to think what the stories might be behind that that institution. Who were these people? What were their lives like? And I suppose that there could be lots of interesting questions that come out of it now to do with animal rights versus livelihoods, and also culturally. I remember that for some reason circuses are always advertised as Russian circus in India. Right?
Yeah.
And perhaps Nisha is going to tell us a little bit, I don't know, about the history of that. So that's my first question already to you. But I think there's a lot. I can think of some novels set in other countries which talk about the lives of circus, but I don't really, I don't know if this is common to everyone or it's just my ignorance, but I don't recall anything telling us about the history of the Indian circus as an institution. And Nisha is going to tell us about, I think, the 20th century as a whole, but her talk is focused on the late 20th century today. So I look forward to it very much. I hope you will also enjoy it. And would you be comfortable with taking questions for clarification in the middle of the talk, or would you like to have them at the end?
Maybe at the end of the talk.
Okay, so we'll reserve questions for the end. We can have the talk for about 40-45 minutes.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
And then we have plenty of time after that for questions and answers. So thank you for being here and welcome, Nisha.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Avarajit. Thank you for that nice introduction and also for your question. Probably I might get back to you at the end. I'm really immensely grateful for Humanities and Languages Division, Ahmedabad University, for hosting my talk. It's my first time in Ahmedabad and it's been lovely 3-4 days here. It's my pleasure, absolutely my pleasure to join you all here giving this talk. My book has, you've already seen, it came out in 2020 with Oxford, and then it's been a long journey, almost 16 years that I've been researching on this area. Now my work has actually moved to a different direction of transnational histories of the circus and acrobatics, to which Abarajit's questions would also, in a way, connects, Russians and Africans and people from other continents coming over to the circus and working and performing for a period of time, which actually gives you a bit of a extended history across the Indian Ocean or across, across continents. So this talk that I'm going to give today, it's more or less based on my book, Jumbos and Jumping Doubles, Social History of Indian Circus. So the title of my book, I should explain, like Jumbo is the greatest elephant, the African elephant, right? I mean, which has been brought as the American Barnum and Bailey or England Brothers Circus would call it, the biggest, the largest, the elephant in the world, So the next part of my title, Jumping Devils, actually would throw back to the history of a small boy from my hometown, Talasheri, which is in the North Malabar of Kerala state, going to work in Europe at the age of 21 as an acrobat and performing in front of Hitler. And Hitler would call him the jumping devil of India, you know. So that's from where I actually got these interesting titles. I found a combination is quite important because it's, again, humans at the same time, animals, right? I mean, it's a world of human and animal relationships. It's a world where both humans and animals existed together. So, yeah. But, of course, animal lovers and rights activists around the world have often pointed their fingers at the circus regarding the cruel methods used to train and tame animals, which include blinding, removal of teeth, claws, and deprivation of food and forced breeding, deprivation of medication, whipping, electric shock, their lives in undersized cages, and transportation from place to place in appalling conditions. Over the past few decades, many countries have issued total or partial bans on animal performances in circuses, nationwide and provincially. In 2001, Bolivia banned the use of all animals, both wild and domestic, in the circus, being the first nation to do so. So my talk will more or less be around the historical ban and training on the training and performance of certain wild animals by the government of India, and the consequent legal battle that ensued, you know, between the circus community and the Indian state. So my attempt would more or less be to look at these issues within the context of various interventions by the colonial and post-colonial states in the subcontinent, advocating protection and conservation, and its emblematic institution, the zoo. So this would unravel the very idea of scientific conservation, right? I mean, it becomes a violent guile of state and civil society while actively propagating the binary of cruelty and mercy in the case of circus animals. So on 2nd March 1991, the Environment Ministry of India initiated an order, a ban order, on the training and performance of 5 categories of animals. In exercise of the powers conferred upon him under Section 22 of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960, the President is pleased to order that no person shall train or exhibit the animals specified below. 1, bears, 2nd, monkeys, 3rd, tigers, 4th, panthers, and 5th, the dogs. The funny thing is, in a corrigendum dated 7th August 1991, the ban on dogs was withdrawn and the lions were substituted. So in less than 3 weeks after the Environment Ministry's order, the Delhi High Court granted a stay on this petition and filed by the Indian Circus Federation, which is the Association of Circus Owners, you know. So as a result, the animals continued in the ring, but they could not perform. They could still keep the animals, but the animals could not perform. 6 years later, after hearing the case at length, on 21st August 1997, the court ordered the government to consider their ban afresh. Both the Indian Circus Federation and the Indian Circus Employees Union. Indian Circus Employees Union is the only existing labor union for circus workers in India. So both of them moved the court. And on 16th December 1998, Delhi High Court dismissed the petition of the Indian Circus Federation, and consequently the next year, Indian Circus Employees Union withdrew its petition. So from 1998, the ban was implemented. Many cases were filed by circus companies in courts around the country against the seizure of animals and seeking compensation from the government. Because with this ban, they began to seize the animals and from the circus companies. The most significant ruling came from the High Court of Kerala in a petition filed by the employees of Jumbo Circus. Dismissing the petitioner's plea, the division bench asked in their telling judgment, and let me quote, "If humans are entitled to fundamental rights, why not animals?" Unquote. So we'll come back to this significant ruling later if we have time. The petitioners appealed to the Supreme Court of India, but of course of no avail. The Apex Court dismissed their appeal in a later hearing on 1st May 2001. The ban, faithful in the lives of thousands of circus artists and workers moving around the country, has become a significant moment in the collective memory of the circus community. Even those who had retired from the trade long before the ban would often begin telling their life stories with some statement about its aftermath. The central argument of the petition filed by the Jumbo Circus, it's a significant petition, was that, let me quote them, the notification dated 14th October 1998 issued by the government arbitrarily threatens the livelihood of around 40,000 animal trainers, caretakers, handlers, and performers, and that the petitioners herein are carrying on their trade, occupation, art profession for nearly 109 years, unquote. So circus owners and workers also argue that the circus animals which were born and brought up in the circus were now accustomed only to the circus way of life. They could not survive in the wild or with any other animal or in any other surroundings, whether a zoo, a sanctuary, or a jungle. And they cited the deaths of 2 circus animals from the global circus within 2 months of their rehabilitation to the Borivali National Park, Mumbai. And the deaths at the Alipur Zoo, where the animals from a mobile petting zoo was again rehabilitated, They pointed out that far from being living in improved circumstances after rehabilitation, the animals were kept in the same cages in which they were brought even after 6 months, They also brought before the court the plight of race horses, the elephants used in temple festivals, the bullock carts used for pulling carriages, the donkeys used for carrying weights in hostile circumstances and climates, the animals being transported to slaughterhouses in cramped vehicles for many hours. In short, they argue that there is a case of discrimination, as there are many other spaces where humans cause animal suffering and make use of the animal labor. Interestingly, the committee constituted to review this ban on animals criticizes the attempt to draw a parallel between the zoo and the circus, and argues that the circus groups have failed to appreciate the total changes in the zoo ethics of late, and shows that the circuses may never be able to achieve the standards of housing and upkeep of animals that the modern zoo provides. However, in August 2013, the Animal Welfare Board of India issued a ban on animal performances in the circus. This is quite interesting because in the first list, elephants did not figure at all, even though dogs could make it into the list, right? And when we look at the history of elephants, there's a long history of elephant performances in India, especially South India. Elephants did not even make it into the list. It's worthwhile noting in this context that elephants figure dominantly in the animal policy of the nation. Project Elephant was launched in 1992. The Elephant Task Force was constituted in 2010 by the Ministry of Environment and Forests, right? As Mahesh Rangarajan, who headed the task force, notes elsewhere, let me quote him, the fact that a species is unique as well as rare has eventually played a role in nationalist projects to protect, review, and propagate it. Unquote. So soon after the court rulings upheld the government order, the zoo authorities around the country were instructed to raid the circuses and capture the animals, take away the animals. Various animal rights NGOs gave a helping hand in the raids and strengthened campaigns against circuses, posting reports and requests widely on the internet. The circular issued to all wildlife wardens for the rehabilitation of circus animals specified 5 shelters spread over various states across India. One, Tamil Nadu has 2 zoos as rescue centers, Tirupati and I think Chennai. Yeah, Tirupati and Chennai. Then there was Nandankandan Zoo. There was one in Bangalore and one in Jaipur. So all these 5 zoos were turned into rescue centers of these animals. Circus owners complained that a large number of animals taken away from them were missing when they reached the zoos. Sujit Dilip, who runs Rambo Circus, remembers. Before I go to Sujit Dilip's argument, actually this was the similar case in Mexico, In 2015, a ban on animals was issued in Mexico, and actually there was a huge protest in the city center by the circus performers against this ban, and the animals were taken away in 2015. So many of them reached the black market and there were so many reports. If you check the newspapers, you can actually see there were so many reports that the state was not in capacity to look after these animals because many of them were abandoned and lying, But many of these circus owners were also pushed to the edge where they had to sell their animals to the black market, So it was a bit of a situation in Mexico. So Sujit Dilip, who runs Rambo Circus, he's one of the proprietors of the Rambo Circus, remembers Rama Master, who used to be a tiger trainer, who committed suicide after his animals were taken away. Babu, a ringmaster from Gemini Circus, told me that many of his seniors who lost the job did not even have a home to go back. Many of these animals died an untimely death, traveled long distances, some without food and water, and animals had to remain in cramped cages for several months, and they were deprived of sex since they were not considered wild but hybrid. And the laws of the zoo are actually against hybrid species. So these lions, which were taken away from lions and tigers as well. Lions especially were neither Asian nor African. So in fact, the Telegraph newspaper notes that the circus animals in Tirupati Zoo was as if they were in a caste system. While the zoo animals were allowed to mate, the circus animals were not. It also notes that many of the lions were under sedatives and tranquilizers most of the time, even though the law clearly forbids it. So when I visited Tirupati Zoo in 2013, the zoo curator's office provided me with a number of existing animals. So all the tigers and tigresses were already dead and gone, and it actually shows that only 45 animals had already perished, and there was absolutely no tigers, and the lions were kept male lions were kept in a different cage and females were in a different cage. Another significant allegation about the state policy was that the zoos in Junagadh, Mysore and Tirupati were revamped with the animals taken away from various circuses. The Animal Defenders International, an NGO, records that the government rescue centers were over their capacity with the exceeding number of animals collected from the circuses. This throws light on the fact that the state did not have an accurate data about the number of animals they were dealing with, right? I mean, almost like I think they didn't know what they were actually going to deal with. So one may ask whether a change of ownership from the private circus to the public zoo, actually, what does it actually make in the real suffering of animals? Does it actually make any difference? Early circuses from around the world, if you look at the history of it, were itinerant menageries with ticketed exhibitions, of caged animals from the wilderness and exotic lands. So there was no effort from the part of the ministry that banned the circus animals to rehabilitate their trainers or caretakers, along with these animals. Nor did they find it necessary to give any compensation to the animal trainers or their assistants. Some of these instances point out how those who argue for legal proscriptions seldom pay any attention to the rehabilitation of the lives of humans any more than animals caught in the game. So Meena Radhakrishna actually points out, piercingly calls it civil society's uncivil acts while discussing the Kalanda community's livelihood, which was shattered following the ban on their traditional occupation of bear dancing. So Martha Keeley Worthington emphatically notes. So Martha Keeley Worthington is an interesting person. She's a zoologist, British zoologist. She was appointed to do research on the Royal SPCA appointed her to do a research on a comparison between circuses and zoos in Britain. So she is a zoologist, and because they were actually planning for a ban of circus animals in the UK. So she came up with a positive report and for the circuses, and in the final stages of her research, the RSPCA backed out from funding and said that this is more or less her opinion, so we actually do not want to have anything to do with it. I met her in UK when I was on a Charles Wallace Fellowship, and her son is also somebody who actually shared these experiences with me. So she actually notes ethically, ecologically, ethologically acceptable ways of interspecies associations are possible and desirable, as they could develop even in zoos and circuses. For this to happen, though, such institutions must change and not be banned. If this change occurs, she thinks, just as we keep a watch on human rights, we will also develop our own understanding of animal rights. So the ban, on the other hand, directly, I mean, if we look at it, directly affected a huge group of humans and animals in marginalized groups of animals and humans, right? But at the same time, it hardly affected other dominant exhibition spaces of captive animals, such as elephants in temples, for instance. The most ironical fact being that these exhibitions are not even considered as animals in performance. What makes certain performances and spaces illegitimate is a triggering question. So, if you look at the temple festivals like Thrissur Puram, for instance, in Kerala, it's like almost like 180 elephants exhibited in huge, scorching sun with firecrackers, and even the wounds are painted with black paints. It's a bit of a thing. Nobody can really touch them because the Elephant Owners Association, they have association and they have really strong political backup. Um, so, and we know what happened with Jallikattu, right, in Tamil Nadu, where how the cultural performance of Jallikattu was banned, and the ban had to be removed later on because of the intervention of the Tamil population, that it's a cultural festival, and this absolutely, the bullfighting is necessary for Tamil culture to, putting, I would say. But it's a triggering question, right? What certain performances become legitimate and certain others become illegitimate? In a short piece titled The Moral Status of Animals, philosopher Martha Nussbaum argues that a truly global justice definitely requires looking across the world for fellow species members who are entitled to a decent life. Interestingly, what has inspired Nussbaum's takes on animals and global justice is the ruling by the Kerala High Court in the case of circus animals, the one that we referred in the beginning. If humans are entitled to fundamental rights, why not animals? On the other hand, political theorist and ethicist Alistair Cochrane says that sentient animals have a right not to be made to suffer and not to be killed, but not a right to liberty. While the human right not to be owned by another is uncontroversial, in the case of animals, it is skeptical. Although he hardly mentions the performing animals, historian Jason Hibal argues that animals are part of the working class. However, the animal trainers have been a typical metaphor of supremacy and cruelty. Many literary strands in literature, certain strands of feminist literature especially, the animal trainer personifies a brutal and violent masculinity that tames, controls, and inflicts pain on the feminine, the nature, or the wild, The nationalist literatures often deploy this metaphor to represent the colonizer, while the wild animal signifies the colonized. It is actually in this grey expanse between the metaphor and the lived experience of an animal trainer that one finds the pain and peril in taming and training an animal, the fear, intimacy, and love the two beings share. In this context, let's look at a rare autobiographical piece from the animal trainer, Damodh Dhotre. So these are elephants, these wild animals, whether tiger, lion, or, elephant, these are huge animals, right? Very powerful, strong animals. Human beings are actually nothing unless and until we have a gun or, so it's... they can really, these are very potential animals. And what does it actually mean to live with a tiger, in reality? What beyond the metaphorical sense? So Damodh Dhotre is a Marathi animal trainer. His autobiography, The Wild Animal The Wild Animal Man, was told to Richard Taplinger. Both of them published this together in the United States and Canada in 1961. And it was translated into his mother tongue after a decade. So this pioneering member actually offers a view into the culture of animal training. It's a contribution to the wildlife history of India. We can also understand the human-animal relationship that Damu actually talks about. One of the most fascinating aspects, true to the spirit of the book, is that it is dedicated to his tiger, leopard. Sonia, let me just quickly show you. This is Damu. Yeah, this is Damu Dhotre and Sonia. So Damu has dedicated his book to Sonia, the most beautiful of them, his darling leopard, with whom he used to perform and enact. And he has also enacted in Hollywood movies with Sonia. The last chapter of his book, Wild Animal Man, he actually describes his passionate love for Sonia and Damu. In all my life, I've never met another animal like her. To cite another instance would be another Marathi animal trainer. Most of the animal trainers came from Maharashtra, even though Malayalis and Bengalis followed, their path. Most of them were from Maharashtra, which this trainer, Marathi trainer, Moreshwar, he used to sleep with the animal. He grew up with the animal, but of course mishaps also happened. He got a deep bite in one of his thighs from a tiger, with which he used to perform. There was another trainer called Gobi who actually lost one of his legs, as part of his wild animal training. But at the same time, he also continued his job, because of his passion, more rather than he continued training domestic animals, like domestic within quotes, animals like elephants, camels, and horses. But at the same time, if you look at what happens to many of these animals, it's both ways, right? The danger of being that interspecies relationship it's both ways, right? If you look at an elephant like Topsy, who was an Asian elephant which worked in the United States, she was electrocuted by Thomas Edison. So that was it. It was held as a huge spectacle in the U.S. during that time, by Thomas Alva Edison, who invented electricity. So this elephant was notorious for her. She's supposed to have, or rather, notorious to have killed 12 people. Then the killing of the elephant was held as a spectacle, and absolutely, finally she was poisoned. Then finally the strong currents of electricity actually killed her. So the living of, it's more of both ways that which the interspecies relationship went. When we are talking about Gobi, I'm also talking about Topsy, here. So that he another animal trainer actually narrated to me an incident which is of a no-teach chimpanzee, called Raja in Gemini Circus. So he always, after his performance, Raja was a bit naughty and prankster. He would come back after his performance to the owner's tent, and then in the evening, when the circus owner and managers are, having some drinks and having this prankster Raja, he immediately goes and sits in the lap of the circus owner. So he would immediately fix him a drink, and he would have his drink, and he'll be happy. But one time, one manager, what he did was, when the owner was absent, gave him a glass of water. So this is actually being narrated to me by one of the circus artists, and they say that he threw a lot of tantrums and somebody finally fixed him a drink. So, I mean, these kinds of stories, where are we having these kinds of stories? Why are we having these kinds of stories about certain animals, This is something that which I've actually found very interesting in the narrations of circus animal trainers, because the individuality of the animal, most of them dealt with, or this person, this animal, So that was quite absolutely. You can actually see that in Damodar's autobiography as well, treating animal as an individual rather than a species, leopard or elephant. In fact, the animal performances, if you look at the history of animal performances and training, it has a larger history, right? Philip T. Robinson observes that animal performances such as tightrope walking, toto riding, elephant riding, dining chimpanzees, and motorcycle riding were regular items in the zoos in the United States in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The European love of the exotic has its root in the territorial, political, racial, and environmental imperialism colonialism exercised in its colonies. The newfound lands and things, people and animals which were in great demand in the native lands of the colonizer became part and parcel of this craze, of exotic animals. The animal trade from the colonies was one of the prosperous enterprises of the colonial empire. So they were exported for scientific experiments, to be showcased in the zoological gardens and parks, to be stuffed in the museums of London and Paris. These are histories those who are working on animal studies might know of. Paul Chambers throws light on how the very idea of the African elephant, the biggest, the largest, the greatest elephant in the world, invokes the obsession that was prevalent throughout Europe and America to see the longest, the biggest, and the most abnormal, and the extraordinary ones from the colonies. Thus, the zoological gardens and parks, which we consider as safe havens of animals today, have been established for the pastime hunting and white man's quest for the preservation of exotic flora and fauna found in their colonies. Just as Donna Haraway observes, once domination is complete, conservation is urgent, but preservation comes only too late. Thank you very much for this talk. Hope you enjoy it. Let me just show you some of the photographs that I have. Just to show you, this is actually from one of the circus artists one of these photographs. They actually talk about the small chimpanzees. It just doesn't show their love for the chimpanzee, but also their relationship with its mother, right? Again, lion cubs and women, Oriental circus. These are Arab horses was again, they used to import. So the transnationalism didn't just, more or less was not human, but also to animals. Animals have an early history from, I would say, from the Roman amphitheaters, if you look at it, African animals from the Oriental animals, all of those performed in the amphitheaters, which are supposedly where the gladiatorial shows, and most often circus histories are traced back to Roman amphitheaters. So they have a history of having these transnational animals from then onwards. So, circuses, Indian circuses.
The word circus comes from circle, right? In Rome, they
yes,
show you the circus.
The amphitheater, the circular, yeah. So, there used to be Appaloosa horses as well, which actually, from the United States and Mexico, these colorful patches, on their body, you can actually see that they are, for that reason, they were part of Indian circuses in South Asia as well. Items with pigs are not so common in the circuses, but you can actually see like this is absolutely a hilarious thing with people with short stature performing with pig. So it's something which to invoke humor, right? So, I mean, this tells the captivity, right? I mean, this photo is it's a telling photograph of how captivity is experienced. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nisha, for this very interesting talk, which throws up a huge number of interesting lines of thought and questions to my mind, at least. I'm sure that all of you also have interesting questions. So we'd be happy to start with preferably with the students. If any of you we have some doctoral students and some undergraduate students here. So any of you would like to start with a question?
Thank you for this wonderful talk. I just wanted to ask, having spoken on rehabilitating the circus trainers, like you mentioned how animals will be rehabilitated. I'm just curious, how did these trainers who have spent most of their lives with the animals, how did they take back towards earning, let's say, different or changing their livelihood? How did they integrate?
Yeah, I mean,
with let's say the urban or the rural space.
Okay, so I mean that was very difficult for them, as I mentioned. One of the that's just one incident that I've heard of, but of Rama Master who committed suicide. But there were so many animal trainers, because this is a profession where they spend their lifetime. This is something which, I mean, you can train. These are, as I told you, like these are very powerful animals, right? I mean, you need a lot of dedication to train an animal, and most of the time they are trained as children. I mean, as cubs, but because most of these wild animals, it's most of the time these trainers say that you're either family or an enemy. So you have to be a family to be, establish that friendship and be in that. So it's a lifetime that animal trainers usually spend to train certain animals. And when the legal ban came, they immediately became outside of legality, right? So that was something which really was a blow on their livelihood, So many of these trainers, they tried shifting to training domestic animals, because when the ban started in 1991, this was more or less the 5 types of animals, right? But then in 2013, this was extended to elephants. But later on, I mean, now there are absolutely no animals in the circuses except some dogs or something, which are, again, the dogs are also not supposed to be performing in the circus, but you can exhibit them. But they tried shifting to training camels and horses, but it's not. Again, those animals were also gradually withdrawn from performing in the circuses. So it was really hard for them to survive. I mean, because many of these people didn't have a home to go back, and they have more or less been, living in the circus. I mean, and they just it's the circus life is also sort of, it's difficult sometimes once you are out of the circus to live in the mainstream world. Some of the artists at least tell me that, some retire and come back home, and they say like it's difficult. Things have are not as in the circus, I mean, so it was totally, shattered their livelihood, and many of them lost their jobs.
Did society welcome them or?
I mean, did the society welcome them? I don't know, because the thing is, many of these people have invested a lot of time and life in a certain profession, and they have no education. They really are a marginalized group of people and come from a subaltern community, right? So many of them did not have a job. I mean, I actually, today Pallavi was mentioning how I actually began my book with an instance where I met this artist Anita, who in one of the campuses I was at the time, and how she lost her job because she did not have a 8th standard education with the university stipulated for a sweeper, for a sweeper job in the. So if that is the case, you can imagine what would have happened with these, many of them. And circus in the early 20th century, it provided livelihood to many from the subaltern children, women, and men from subaltern castes and communities. So yeah, sure. Please.
Yes. Can we have a couple of questions together, maybe?
Yeah.
Satya and one more.
Yeah.
Both you can put your questions.
I had actually two questions. Ma'am, I'm a PhD student whose work is on urban informality, and one of the aspects of informality is also like the same question that you asked very fundamentally, that certain performances were considered legitimate and certain performances were considered illegitimate. So ma'am, I was just thinking about the role of an upper caste, upper middle class morality in determining this, because just like the case of circus, I had an interaction with demotivated tribes who used to have like king cobras and like who were snake charmers, and who used to train monkeys and small things, but not at a circus level, but at the small mela level.
Absolutely.
And they too were affected by similar animal rights, by similar rulings, just like the circus owners were. So I was just wondering about the role of like upper class morality. And my second question was, this is happening. This is related to a last bits where you were talking about conservation and like preservation. And I was just thinking, what is the role of nationalism in all of this? Because I'm linking it to the Project Cheetah or the Project Cheetah revival, or like which is happening in Pune, which is not going as per plan. And like I was just thinking about whole larger questions of animal conservation and the role of nationalism in this.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I mean,
Maybe we'll wait for the answers and then.
Okay. I mean, just it's a huge question, right? I mean, the politics of conservation itself. I mean, when we look at the conservation, we can understand that it's more or less restricted to the megafauna, for instance, the elephants, the tigers, and what about the spiders and mosquitoes, I mean, nobody is actually really bothered about their lives. So what is this idea of conservation? And even with the zoos, it's like a zoo. I mean, if you look at a tiger's or a lion's area of natural habitat, thousands and thousands of acres, right? Elephants, I mean, they walk. I mean, their natural habitat is something which, and just by making or expanding the zoo, I mean, animals in the zoo to a modernized zoo setting where you have far more fruits, better I'm saying like from a cage, small cage, removing from a small cage to making them into a half a kilometer, expanding their spaces actually doesn't do anything to their life. We feel better as humans, as as people who believe in humanity and people who believe in charity and benevolence, we feel better. But actually, does it do anything to the I think it's a lot of conservation politics there. I think it also has to do with many of these NGOs which are based in the West, rather than, and many of these post-colonial nations adopting these ideas from the West. The ideas of humanity, charity, benevolence, all of these. Kate Thomas has done a wonderful work, right? Where he actually talks about the 18th century, where where these ideas of charity, these literary terms of charity, benevolence, all of these words actually began to find a place in many of the literatures in British. But at the same time, if we look at it from a different angle, we can understand that that even the children's pranks extended to killing animals and inflicting pain on them during 17th century England. If we read Kate Thomas, we can understand how that idea of humanity and charity is changing. And many of these, ideas actually come from the West, from where these ideas have been finding as human rights and animal rights ideas, which prove totally unsuitable for the global South, and sometimes to them as well, to the global North as well. So I think it's not just the upper caste. It is there. This is a very middle class view. It's very obvious, right? But it also has a history that goes back to the West, where these ideas have been coming from, and the NGOs have been propagating it. And many of these NGOs have a Western base, PETA, or Animal Defenders International, or similar thing happened with children as well. In 2011, there was a ban on children, the performance of children, and many of these children were taken away from the circuses and placed in it. And again, the same thing, similar thing as what happened with the animals. They did not have a home to go back, and many of these children were also from not just from India, from Nepal as well. So not just that they had no home to go back in India, they also were sent to Nepal, and there also they didn't have a home to go back. Again, like this NGO, German NGO, which gave a helping hand, German as the name in trust, they actually established another circus with many of these children who were rescued from the circuses, which is, which is there in Kathmandu. So so it's a bit of a paradoxical situation, So thank you for your question.
My question sort of segues from what we do. So post the Wildlife Protection Act, when animal rights became more stringent, so circuses sort of became the only avenues where you could actually see the animals up and close when zoos is kind of caged. So do you think that the circus industry sort of led to the development of legal and public discourse in animal welfare industry? And did that eventually come and backfire the circus industry? Because the more you talk about it, the more you become aware of it, and you want the animals to be distanced from the whole thing. So did the whole discourse on animal industry eventually backfire the circus sector?
If I understand your question, I don't know. Can you once again come?
So, like, you think the whole discourse about the whole legal discourse or the public discourse about animal welfare.
Ah.
So did that eventually backfire? So I mean to say that the circus industry has sort of inspired this discourse. It is not more encouraged this discourse. So did that eventually come and backfire the circus industry because now you cannot use animals?
Absolutely, it did. I mean, they lost all their animals, right? First of all, and children. I mean, all the animals were taken away. Almost like, I think, 3,500 animals were taken away. And then, the children in 2011, children were banned from performing. The wonderful thing is that many of the training that happens, it is more or less given to the children because children's body is considered supple and the trainers believe that it's easier to train children. It's the same with many other physical cultures like Kaladipayattu, for instance, or gymnastics, for instance. We know how China has been criticized for training gymnasts, right? I mean, if we look at the autobiography of
Tiger Mother.
sorry?
Tiger Mother and the
No, I was just thinking about this Chinese Hollywood star. Jackie Chan, you know, I mean, if you look at his autobiography, it's really a very stringent training that was imparted to him, you know, at the modern drama, you know, theatre.
It's Hong Kong, it's not China.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, Chinese within quotes. Still, Hong Kong is part of China now. So it's like again, you know. So this Kaladipayattu, for instance, where if you look at the autobiographies of many of these traditional practitioners of traditional cultures, we can understand that many of them consider this training as part of this mastering of the art, you know. But when we look at the circuses, it's more of 1 cup. I mean, that's the way actually Bachpan Bachao Andolan, which banned the children, actually talk about it, you know. I mean, with training, with beatings of the trainer and with just 1 cup of tea and 2 biscuits. I mean, nobody can do a lot of exercises with a full stomach, you know. But that's an outsider's view, right? I mean, an insider's view would be like totally different. But these are things, you know. I mean, this really affected, that extended. I think it was very easy to ban the circus people because they were subaltern and, you know, marginalized, and as you are saying, like as he was mentioning about snake charmers and Kalanda community, as Meena Radhakrishna was mentioning, it's quite easy for the state to make them, you know, ban them or. But again, with this global idea, it's also about global idea of human rights and animal rights, changing human rights and animal rights. But if it's changing, one should also, the legal history should be taken into consideration, and one should also take into consideration the animals and people involved in this struggle, right? I mean, so absolutely without considering this was implemented, it's totally, I mean, yeah.
Thank you for your very interesting talk. I think this is really fascinating work, and it's pioneering in the sense that I hope it will lead lots of scholars actually to think deeper about human-animal relationship in South Asia, because Jatakas, Panchtantra, then, you know, Akbar, Jahangir, and then Jungle Book, and everything. So, but hardly much, I think, you know, some scholars like Saman Bigby and Trotman and others have kind of touched upon, but really we don't have proper book that could look into human-animal relationship in history, in its wider context. So now coming to the question, so what is the history of circus being introduced in India? How it was received, how it became popular. I'm sure it should be there. I'm sorry, when I apologize my ignorance, not having read your book yet, but
No problem, not.
I assume it's there. What contemporaries, in Indian literature, reflected on this new thing, perhaps if it was introduced during the colonial period, how it became popular, and then what does it tell in terms of the shifts? Because perhaps earlier people would have been living in closer proximity to many of the animals. And maybe some kind of changes during the colonial period. Now, people would have been kind of not getting that much opportunity to see that variety, different variety of animals. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for your question, and I really appreciate your kind mention. I mean, it's means a lot. When I started my research, like 16 years ago, I should say, like I mean, if you look at the history of the circus, I mean, you don't really. The major challenge that I faced was the absence of archival sources, the official archives, but not just the absence of official archives on circus histories, but also the absence of other sources such as memoirs or autobiographies or diaries of circus being. But when we look at the histories of the continents, for instance, like the United States or Australia or UK, Europe, for instance, circus histories, I mean, at least a few works have been published, and some of those historical works, literary works, and research studies have actually come out, But circus studies as such remains in the periphery of the academia and publishing industries. I mean, it's been a bit of a challenging effort to locate, do field work across India and make this research happen. If we look at the history of it, I mean, again, people say that in Kerala there is a story, but that the father of circus acrobatics, Kileri Kunikanan teacher, who is supposed to be the father of circus acrobatics in India. So he first saw a European circus, the Hippodrome Circus, and he accepted a challenge. I mean, he posed the challenge from the European circus trainer to, perform or come up with a better acrobatic that was being shown in the circus. The same story you can see in the Maratha context if you look at it. Vishnuvat Chhatre, a horse trainer with Maharaja Undwar, saw an Italian circus, and the animal performances in the circus, I think the owner posed some challenge: if somebody could perform like the way I do, my tent and my supplies will be given to you, and do something like that. So, I mean, these are stories, these are repetitive kind of stories, and that, linger amongst the circus community, that about the way in which circus was initiated. However, I mean, I found that actually one of my chapters, the first chapter of my book, actually looks at the history of circus acrobatics, where, I mean, many of the early acrobats were Kalaripayattu practitioners, where there was actually the first thing that was, the first circus endeavor by Kileri Kunjiganan teacher was not a circus company, it was a circus kalari, where he was a Kalaripayattu Gurikul himself, and he transformed his Kalaripayattu the space into a circus kalari, where he transformed many of the traditional kalari, where only certain, it was a very caste stringent space where only Naya kalari, only Nayas could enter, or there were other kalaris like Muslim kalaris, Christian kalaris, Pulaya kalaris, were very caste stringent space. And he modernized, or rather he transformed this traditional caste stringent kalari into a circus kalari where all castes were welcome and all people from subaltern communities and castes were trained. And he himself was somebody who actually, he chose Christianity he really, at the end of his life, and remained a Christian, and actually married from a lower caste. He was from a lower caste profession, but he later he chose Christianity. So this is something which was.
I was thinking about mahouts and horse trainer, or even bullocks that needs to be trained before you can yoke them for pulling a cart or taking them for. So these professions must have existed, and once you have institutions like circus, perhaps they got more kind of got intensified in terms of introducing or making some changes. But then these professions must have existed much widely rather than a concentrated form in circus.
Yeah, but I think wild animal training as such, probably, it's something which, just as he was mentioning, you see like a bad trainer, a bad dancer, a single bad dancer moving around, or a cobra trainer, like a lion, a tamer, roaming around, bear dancer, going around with a bear. But in order for you to be able to train this huge amount of animals, like tigers, lions, the breedings also exist, a huge breeding, like liger was crossed with there was liger, like lion, tiger, crossbreed, and in a huge manner, it actually, I think it more or less it started with the circus.
So now it's been through your book.
Yeah.
So we were talking for a while. I had several questions in fact, but I'm not going to really go over all. So I just wanted to ask a couple of them. Could you comment on the discourse of freedom that the circus seems to embody? Because you've got acrobats.
Sorry?
The discourse of freedom, because you have circus acrobats, you've got trapeze artists, you've got a lot of aerial display, you've got a lot of gender also encapsulated there, which I know is a main thrust of
Absolutely.
your work. So if you could comment a little further on that. But also that the circus is an arena of containment and rigor, because it's also containing nature in a sense, right? Because it's containing animals. So I'm also thinking of Timothy Barnard's book. He's a Singaporean scholar who has written Singaporean stories. He teaches that. He's also written a book called Nature Contained, which kind of made me think of this animal, because you're talking about captivity. So that is one. If you could just comment on this. And the other thing I wanted just ask you is also what kind of cultural imaginary is created through the circus in South Asia particularly, because since you mentioned caste and there is a high and low culture, and the circus seems to propound more of a low culture, sort of imaginary.
Yeah, I think you yourself have responded to your last question. It's more of considered as, high. I mean, when we look at those high-low cultures, it's more of a low culture. I think it has a history of that, right? I mean, not just because of its movement, the nomadic nature. So these are actually one of those things with which the Supreme Court actually bans the children from the circus, nomadic nature, which actually prevents them from getting the children from getting the education. So I mean, this subaltern nature, you can actually see that, and how as many of the circuses started in the West, for instance, like in the British circus, most of them started as family circuses, and because of these family circus, which where the father would be performing, the mother would be performing, and the children will also be trained, and they're all performing, and it so happens that I'm at loss, and I would want to join a circus troupe, so people used to join like that. I mean,
so who would be the kind of people who would join the circus troupe?
Absolutely, subaltern castes and communities, just as I was mentioning about.
But even as they were children. Even as they were children.
Even as they were children. I mean, yeah, even as they were children. I mean, one of the ways in which the children joined early circuses were actually as part of family, So with many of these, and even in the colleries of circus colleries of Kileri Kunjikan teacher, the children were trained, and many of these children came from the fishermen community, and like Thea community, and most of they were from the subaltern castes and communities. And one instance I remember, one of the acrobats actually talking to me. I'm just bringing this up. He was actually talking about his daughter-in-law. So she's a Nepali. So she comes to join the circus in a bit of a circumstance. She and her sister was actually coming from was being sold by her uncle for sex work. So then he offered the money and took the children to the circus, and they one of them is his daughter-in-law. He said he trained both these children with his grandson, who actually married one of the girls. So these from many subaltern backgrounds, and sometimes these subaltern backgrounds, I mean, circus definitely provided livelihood for many from the subaltern communities and castes, and sometimes the only option could be like, either sex work or circus or beggary, I mean, so that it's actually from those options that people are choosing the circus, and I mean, that's so much there. And to speak about gender, I mean, gender is so much there. I mean, to begin with, it would be like, it's always there's a history of women's engendering the women's body, right? I mean, in performance, and that is there in the circus too. And sexualization of a woman's body, that often happens in the circus as well, and where women are made to perform in Scandi Chuppi's costumes, where where her. But the wonderful thing is how they perceive themselves, like many of the time, not just in the trapeze, but there is an item called boneless, where women are. It's actually a very difficult performance, where it needs to be trained from. You have to undergo a bit of a training for that, and then you perform this item boneless, where it's a contortionist act. So where the body movements are, and this is absolutely sexualized in Indian circus, and but how they perceive themselves. If you look at that, many of them, when they see a photo of a fellow artist and they are looking at it, they are more or less not speaking about her scanty costumes. They are more or less speaking about, oh, she is this person's her husband. She has 2 children. She has been in the circus. She performed boneless. She used to perform trapeze, or she used to perform this one, and I worked with her for 14 years, so she was very excellent. So those are the things that they more or less see it, rather than the artists themselves, the individual themselves, and how they. I think it's very important how the women perceive themselves and their fellow colleagues. How they perform it. Whether they look at it as, even though gender and sexualization is so much there, controlling and disciplining the body. Yeah.
And did you have any challenges because of your gender in accepting people also?
Yeah, of course, I think people generally, it's more of condescending patriarchy. Because when I began my research, I was in my 20s, and people thought, not so harmless, but still, keeping an eye, because this person might be a journalist or a representative of the government. But generally, the people in the circus are very warm and welcoming, and usually, I think it's also because they are so much exposed to it's a lot of mobility that happens, right? And they are so much exposed to public and people meeting them, journalists meeting them, or it's a performance that they do, and they interact with many people. And the circus tent itself is a replica of the nation, with people from all kinds, interstate migrants are there, people from acrobats from all parts of India, migrant workers from all parts of India coming in, and or skilled laborers from all parts of India. And not just all parts of India, but transnational acrobats as well, like Russians were really part of it, right? Especially from the 50s, the Russian artists were quite that boom was so much there. I think also because of the Soviet Russian circus, and where Russian artists began to come. I think Mera Naam Joker also did a bit of a job in the 70s, where the Russian artists again, got a kind of projection in the. But now it's most of African artists are coming over. Another interesting thing with these Russian artists is that many of these Russian artists are, are from the erstwhile Soviet Union, Uzbekistan, Armenia, I think all those regions, the erstwhile Soviet Union, rather than
Actually Russian.
not Russian, actually, yeah.
quite interesting where you showed a particular image of Damu and Sonia with a leopard and a trainer.
Yeah, leopard,
It
yeah.
sort of also reminded us of a very recent picture that is floating at this point of time between Narendra Modi and the car. Deep joke, by the way. That is very interesting. Ways in which connections can still be made. But I was just wondering if you could just quickly comment on how historiography itself works around, say, trying to think about animals, trying to think about human-animal interactions. So if we look at how things have changed over the course of time, there is this going beyond the Anthropocene for sure. But would you still say that something of that sort is possible? And this is also because we have PhD students over here, and some comment on historiography will help them help us. I was just thinking, how can we also, and this might be much of what we're doing, what we've done, how can we also think of not the long durée interaction of animals per se, which is what Trotman and that entire ilk did, but also perhaps something from a circus perspective, which is also very narrow, which is also very micro, and those narratives, how can that also help in understanding human-animal interactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was looking at this legal history, with starting with the ban and going back to the legal struggle between the circus community and the Indian state, one thing that was missing was this element of human-animal relationship. So, I mean, they are talking about how other animals have been, you have seen, right? I mean, how the other animals have been. There are other spaces where cruelty is executed by humans over animals. There are other spaces where animal performances are being done. There is a long history of elephant performances in other spaces where, again, there is a more or less a creation of legitimate performing space and illegitimate performing space. But neither the petitioner nor the state who banned the animals talk about the human-animal relationship in the circus. The intimacy between the trainer and the animal is something which I was totally my research, I would say, I was fascinated with that aspect was completely absent from all of these discourses. That's from where I actually started, And if you look at it, it's something which is quite marvelous, I mean, you can see that men and women, or people from children, getting. If you read Damu Dhotre's autobiography, he actually starts his chapter by child Damu, being introduced. There is Shala Circus, and he's going around and seeing lions and tigers, and there's this lion mama, and he's becoming close to her, chatting with her, and this starts as a passion. And at one point he mentions, as a child, I was not thinking about anything else but how to be friends with this lions and tigers, and this is how it started, and this is how it actually, developed. For some, I'm saying, it depends on the individuality of the trainer, absolutely. But for some, like Damu Dhotre, it was a sheer passion, and it was a profession that he developed and that he sort of, I think it's a huge, the human-animal relationship in the circus, and this legal struggle, this legal history, and what it has done to the circus is something which it definitely contributes to the larger discourse on human-animal relationship, and animal studies too. I mean, not just in the context of South Asia, but in the context of the global history. Yeah, please.
So we have maybe a quick short question.
My question might sound a bit off topic, but there is more focus on the terrestrial animals and the circus. But what about the marine animals which are involved? Are there any acts across the world or any countries who come up with, because still we can see dolphins and seals being used in a particular shows across the world. So are there any acts or policies?
In circuses as well. In circuses as well. I mean, dolphins and dolphin shows and certain circus actually used. I mean, I think especially the European circuses used the polar bear was there. I mean, so it's seal performances are still there. I mean, many circuses. Indian circus also, Germany actually had a seal. Yeah.
And it was very good, thank you. I learned a lot. So this is completely out of ignorance. The thing is that, because you said that you started out with the question of looking at human-animal relationships, which I'm afraid I haven't read the book yet. So I'm sure you've talked a lot about that. But I was wondering, how does the law, in case of animals and human relationships, deal with this entire emotional aspect? So in the sense that, what is the place of emotion in law?
Nothing is my answer. There is no emotion, and I think this is something that was totally absent, you know. And even Martha Kelly Worthington's report was, I mean, she actually, her study, I mean, that was more of a zoology kind of a research that she did, right? I mean, even that was brought into by this review committee, and they dismissed it, saying that no, it's the views are totally of you know, even this committee which constituted by the Indian state, I mean, they said absolutely nothing. I think that was brought in as an evidence by the circus owners, you know, who were trying again, you know, with and this is something which actually does a lot, right? Sujit actually, this Rambo circus owner, he told me that he grew up with, he never really, you know, I mean, had anything to worry about lions and tigers, but I'm more scared of dogs, you know, because he's more or less, you know, seen these animals being around, and, you know, I mean, sort of being grown up with that. And many of the circus, I think, personals have a story. Why do we have these stories, right? I mean, why do we have Raja, the chimpanzee? Why do we have the gorilla? I mean, or why do we have this chimpanzee being fondled, or lion cubs being fondled, you know? Why are they? It's not just proximity, it's also it's that bonding. But again, when the bonding, when it's human, human bonding with animals, and bonding comes with bondage as well, right? I mean, it's a complicated relationship that goes, that contains both the element of bonding and bondage. So it's a complicated relationship, and it probably could have been addressed with the complexity it deserved, you know. So
I think that's a wonderful note on which to end this very rich discussion. Complexity, I think, is what defines this this project, this field, which is. And I was just thinking, it's so fascinating that when we talk here all the time about interdisciplinarity, and this really kind of embodies that in many ways, right? Because we're talking about, you're engaging with the work of philosophers, you're engaging with the work of social historians, legal historians, all kinds of work, and even your methods are, I think, next to you. Have interviews,
Yes.
ethnography, and then I think archival work as well. So I think it's a reminder to us to, of course, we need to be anchored in our disciplines and our methods, but then I think it's always interesting to go for a question that is really intriguing, and then learn the methods and the literatures that are relevant to them. I think that's just for the students over here. And again, a lot of things I'm curious to ask. We have tea outside, tea and biscuit. Last time I said that it was over, so I hope that this time it's still there. I think Sangeeta and some others have some questions, so you can ask the speaker while we have tea. So thank you very much again, Dr. Nisha.
Thank you so
Thank you all
much.
for being